We are live. Lift Big, Eat Big episode number is 18. 18 now. And today we are covering complexes, a topic that you don't often hear about, and also an exercise modality you don't often see used outside of specific strength sports. So it'd be good for anyone listening who maybe isn't training for a specific strength sport, but would like to use complexes for the benefits that they provide. And we're going to run into all of those as well and the different applications behind it. But we have Colm Wolf, 2 times World's Strongest Man competitor, New Zealand's Strongest Man. We have Mona DeLacy on the pod too, Commonwealth medalist in Olympic weightlifting, CrossFit Games athlete. Obviously, CrossFit Games just finished too. 6 times karate world champion. That's also living in myself as a strength conditioning coach. So we have a wealth of different backgrounds and experience to share on these topics. So we're going to start with complexes. And Mona, did you want to maybe dive into, because complexes are mainly used in Olympic weightlifting, so you want to maybe dive into what they are and maybe just some examples and why you would use them?
Sure, yeah. So in weightlifting, obviously the two classical lifts is the snatch and the clean and jerk. Now, complexes normally consist of like an extra movement like added to that, or a movement that will help you get better or stronger in those movements. Now, I actually have an article on our Lift Big Eat Big site as well, talking about complexes and the reason
your favorite ones.
What?
It has all your favorite ones, your 14 favorite complexes.
14 of my favorite complexes on there. And I am honestly a big believer in complexes, and not just for elite level athletes. I mean, it's made a big difference in my training. It's definitely stepped up my game from, being at the level I was to like getting that extra bit of strength out of me, being an athlete that's been lifting for like over 20 years. That was like one of the things that we tried, and we felt like that really built that extra bit of strength, and just working on certain weaknesses. So again, it can be used for like if you've got certain weaknesses, if you need to build strength, but then it's also really good for beginner level athletes to teach them the movements and how it is broken down. Now it's one of those movements that like you can put quite a few movements together. You don't want to necessarily make it like a CrossFit thing where you put, 6 or 7 lifts together to try and make a complex. Everything is done for like or there's a certain reason for every complex that you do. There's a purpose behind it. So for example, if the athlete is battling with, for example, just overhead strength, and in the snatch, so then you would do movements like drop snatches plus overhead squats, like that's a complex, or doing a drop snatch with a tempo overhead squat, or if you want to add a little bit more to it, you can do something like a power snatch and an overhead squat, and then a drop snatch, or a snatch pull and a snatch. Like there's many that you can put together, but the main aim of it is to make sure that the athletes do them correctly, and that there's a goal at the end of the day of putting your complex together.
Nice. And yeah, as Mona was saying, you're essentially doing 2 to 4, typically 3, 2 to 3 exercises, while typically not putting the barbell down. So you're doing all these in a row. So for example, if you were doing power clean plus front squat plus push press as a complex, you might do 1 plus 1 plus 1, or you might do 2 cleans, 1 front squat, 2 jerks, or something like that. So that will be a complex. And obviously you have goals within that depending on the sport, really. So often weightlifters might use that further away from competition. You're typically using it to build work capacity, to build volume, all those things. But Colm, in strongman, do you have any specific complexes that either you or programmer use, or that you've seen other people use? Is it as prevalent within the strongman?
Definitely not as prevalent as weightlifting, but a lot of people do implement them kind of as exactly the same idea as weightlifting, and they're taken directly from there a lot of the time. So there's like, you can do the same sorts of things where you would do perhaps a like pull to the waist first for a few reps before going up to the belly. This is talking about a continental axle clean, and then going to the shoulders, something like that. Most common, like if you're going to count this as a complex, but if you go, say, a few reps, let's say 3 reps, 3 reps strict, 3 reps push press, and then 3 jerks of whatever style.
Ooh.
That's another pretty common type thing. Doesn't have to be 3 reps, but I personally use those a little bit in trying to get clients to just get more efficient at doing a certain part of the lift, just like Mona was saying. And I find that if they're doing it immediately prior to the full lift, it just seems like it gets a little bit more ingrained, opposed to splitting them up too far. So another example, let's say we're talking about deadlift, pretty common also in Shaco, he would do the old, let's say someone's struggling with their position off the floor. You could do, for example, 3 reps to the knee first before doing 3 full reps, something like that. And just having immediately going into the full deadlift immediately after that partial, like pulling it just to the knees, seems to really ingrain that motion quite nicely. And you can do, like in strongman, you can, just like weightlifting, you can come up with all sorts of variations. You can do it with stones, like teaching different, you can do, say, same thing, 3 laps or 3 like 1 motions and then going into a lap position, that sort of thing. So in strongman, I would say I use it mainly for technique. And also the other reason I would use it in strongman is for the sake of time. So not everyone has the luxury of doing, say, 3 sets of 5 of this exercise, this partial range, 3 sets of this or whatnot. But if you just do 3 sets of a complex, it's a lot faster and you still get in a lot of work, a lot of technique work. And yeah, it's just time efficient. So those would be my main uses for complexes in strongman.
Yeah, no, for sure. The technique aspect that Mona's also talked about, that's a big one too. Do you want to chime in there, Mona?
Yeah, I actually wanted to say, and I didn't actually mention this when I was talking, and Cole kind of made me think of this now, is it's a great way of also priming the athlete for whatever the lift they are going to do. So when I work with my individual athletes, if I know that my athlete, say it's a snatch day, but I know some of my athletes or a certain athlete sometimes cuts the pull short, then I will make them do movements like when you were talking about, the 3 pulls to the knee and then like to the hip or whatever. I would then make them do things like snatch pull or snatch deadlift shrug plus, a hang snatch or a snatch deadlift shrug plus muscle snatch plus snatch from the hip as like a primer to get them ready so that when they do their snatches, it's ingrained in their mind to think, get tall, complete that pull. So often it gets used as like just cueing the athlete of what they need to do. And then when they go into competitions, they can use those primers as part of their barbell warm-up then to get themselves ready for when they do their snatches, especially if they have certain weaknesses and especially if, well, not really weaknesses, but sometimes they lack completing that pull or they don't stay over the bar long enough, or they relax at the bottom of the movement. Then you can use those movements just to kind of cue and remind them of, what you kind of want them to focus on when they do the actual lift.
Yeah, those are good points too, because complexes are seen, okay, they're done heavy, they're done as your main work, but they can be done as your warm-up or primer kind of thing, like Mona mentioned there. And even from like a strength conditioning perspective, maybe if you're listening to this, maybe you don't compete in weightlifting or strongman, and you're lifting just to get strong, look good as well. I mean, there's a couple of old school rugby strength conditioning coaches that swear by complexes and love them. And I see the value, especially in sports like that, but even just general fitness and just the idea of using complexes almost as a form of circuit training. To me, in my head, it's, I guess, a more valuable form of circuit training because you're having to hold a relatively heavy load and perform these exercises. So you can develop work capacity that you couldn't develop doing other things. And yes, you can develop work capacity doing various circuits, doing various extensive tempo stuff, like 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off is a classic one for developing work capacity. But being able to do 2 + 2 + 2 on a power clean, front squat, push press, for example, is going to get you damn fit for lifting. And that's one of the other things there as well, because, for example, strongman or weightlifting or powerlifting are so specific to lifting a barbell. Going for a run, biking, swimming, or whatever, yes, that will get you generally cardiovascular fit, but it's not going to transfer that well to your ability to last through a competition, for example. Whereas doing complexes or on the minute work, etc., is going to develop what we'll call a specific conditioning for those barbell or strength sports, which is really nice. But even for the general lifter looking just to get stronger and build muscle, I mean, the I guess you could say the time under tension of having to perform some of these complexes can be pretty nuts, and you develop strength in the back, like lower back, upper back, that you wouldn't develop doing anything else, because you have to hold and support that bar the entire time. But Colm, do you have any, I guess, favorite go-to complexes that you like, or just favorite ones in general? Maybe around the deadlift or around any of the strongman events? You mentioned a couple already, but are there any others?
Yeah, so I forgot to mention as well, like the other thing with strongman is a lot of the time we have events which essentially are a complex. So we just had New Zealand
Full
Strongest Man.
medleys.
Yeah, we call them medleys. New Zealand Strongest Man was just on the weekend. They had was like a partial deadlift that went down in height and ended on a deficit. So that would, just training for that in itself would be another example of me giving complexes to athletes. But favorite ones for the deadlift are normally either the deadlift, if they need focus on work off the floor, would be deadlift to the knee, anywhere from two to three reps to the knees, and then 2 to 3 full ones. Really simple, but I really like it. By not doing that whole rep at the start, it really gives you some immediate feedback whether your back is in a nice position off the floor. And then vice versa, you can also do the same thing where you can do like a Dimmel deadlift, or like the top half of a deadlift if someone's struggling. I do this more for general pop to try and encourage people to feel their glutes in the lockout, or just teach them to think about driving their hips forward to lockout. And that's, let's say you do 3 to 5 Dimmel deadlifts at the top and then go into your full ones after. This is assuming that they're capable of pulling it off the floor, but that's another really simple one. Otherwise, I have used a little bit. This is again more so general population, but you could do the same thing in strongman, but it would be pretty hard with a stone. But like a ball, you could do. Sometimes we do 3, so it's quite hard, but 3 pickups off the floor with it's like a heavy. It's not quite Atlas stone weight, but it's like a heavy, rubber ball. 3 reps of that. 3 reps. Where you basically pick it up and extend and throw it. So it's kind of explosive, but it's like a triple extension. Just think of if you're loading a stone, and then the final 3 are to the shoulder or over the shoulder. That's a nice simple one. More so for general pop, it's probably a little bit too much if you're training, like say it's too much for a max strongman event, something like that. And it's probably too much if you're doing it for conditioning for strongman, because it's with a heavy load, it's just going to be too hard. But for general population, I quite like it. And if we're including, like, technically, so the old 21s, the partial bicep curls.
Yeah.
So I actually use them quite a bit for general population, just as a finisher. So when we're talking about 21s, it's 7 reps, like bottom half of a bicep curl, 7 reps from the top half up, and then 7 full ones. Back in the day, they used to say things like it would target the different parts of the bicep and stuff like that. I don't do them for any of that reason. It's just a nice, fun way for general population to think about getting in a set of 20, basically. That's the only reason I use it as a finisher. So it's not, but I often do little complexes like that, which are a little bit, I suppose, different to normal. But I just find it, saying to a client, we're going to finish on this 20 reps, it's just a little bit daunting for them sometimes. Again, I'm talking about general population, not hard out athletes. And if in their head they're counting each time to 7, it seems to make it a little bit more enjoyable for them. The other one I haven't done in years, but used to do sometimes on the bench press, or have other people do it, is if you do like a close grip bench press, relatively heavy load, let's say 5 reps. So this is another example of more of a finisher. But let's say you do 5 reps. We'll say 2 reps in the tank on your last run, right? So it's relatively heavy. And then after that, you chuck a board there. Another 5 reps. And then you chuck another, so 15 total reps. You chuck a third board after the middle 5, and you're essentially just doing the top few inches range of motion. That one gets your triceps, believe me.
Damn! I need to do that. We need a board. Leafy.
That's the thing. You really need a training partner to, even like if you've got a board, it's just too much of a pain. But if you've got someone who can quickly like swap them out, I actually really like that one. Funnily enough, though, even though you'd think it like hits mainly triceps, you'll find I always used to find my front delts were just on fire along with my triceps at the end. But again, it's just an example of like a fun kind of finisher, which technically is still a complex. So yeah, I thought I'd mention it there.
Yeah, there's a few of those different, I guess you could call it a mechanical drop set, like when you're doing drop sets from high incline, all the way down to flat eventually. So, but you can use the same weight throughout. So a mechanical drop set is very similar to that too. But Mona, do you want to give maybe like a couple of your favorite snatch complexes, a couple of your favorite clean and jerk complexes?
Okay, just hold this probably is a little. Okay, so again, it kind of depends on like what level you are, but if I had to start off from like a beginner level athlete when it comes to like snatch,
oh my gosh, Mia's crazy.
It has to do with snatches and to better your snatches or learn how to do the movement properly. And I'm a big believer of teaching an athlete from the top down. What I mean by that is you would let the athlete do a movement from the hip or the high hang, and then from the hang, and then from below the knee. Now, that is a really powerful complex to do for a beginner level athlete when you help or when you teach them how to snatch. Because when they can snatch, instead of you want to take out all the think work, because normally what happens with an athlete is when they do snatches, it normally goes wrong when it starts moving from the ground. So if you can teach them from the top downwards, their brains just think of it differently, and I can't even think at the moment. And they actually think of the movement different, and they learn the bar path a lot quicker that way. So I would give them things like 3-position snatches, which would be from the hip, the hang, and then below the knee. And I would also give them things like when they are a little bit now more advanced, I would make them do things like maybe like a hang power snatch plus a hang snatch. And then if you want to make it like a little bit more complex and add a bit more strength into that, you can add like an overhead squat. Now some other ones with snatches. Now this is more for strength building. And I did a lot of this, especially towards my build up for certain competitions. And one of my weaknesses was always staying over the bar, which is a weakness for a lot of athletes. And what we ended up doing is we did a lot of things where we would do like snatch pulls with a pause at the knee, snatch pulls with a pull at the hip, pause at the knee, snatch pulls with a pause at the knee, snatch pulls with a pause at the hip, and then we would do a snatch. So that time under tension really made my back extremely strong. It reinforced that me staying over the bar longer, and then it ultimately really changed the way I snatched. And that was probably one of like the most powerful snatch complexes that I did. Now, I was an athlete I had really strong legs and I was really strong overhead, but one of my weaknesses would often be the pull, and that was for the snatch and the clean and jerk. And things that I would do is with the clean, for example, is again I would.
Oh my gosh, man! You want me to come back to you?
She's at the moment where she is just super active, and we just can't contain this little one.
I'll come back to you, Leaf.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Mia's going crazy in there. But what I find interesting as well is, hang on, Mona's still talking. I muted you, Mona.
You muted me?
Yeah, I told you I was going to come back to you.
Okay, I think
Are you good now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I was going to say, before I end off, I think Bobby wants to talk the same time as me, is I wanted to mention another complex that's been super amazing for building strength, that's helped my athletes if they battle to, if they tend to find that if they do a cleans and it's safe going for a new PR or they're in competition and they get really tired and they end up missing the jerks. So we would really do a strength building phase where we would try and really fatigue the athlete in the clean and make sure that they can still jerk afterwards. And things that I would do is like front squats plus jerks. Now, when you do things like front squats plus jerks, you can
Oh my gosh.
you can load it pretty heavy. And then also you could do things like jerk from the front and jerk from behind neck as well. And that is another great exercise again for strength building, but also if the athlete is battling with their line. And you would see sometimes when the weight gets really heavy, athletes would end up jerking the weight forward. Now, by going really heavy with a jerk behind neck and then straight after that doing a jerk from the front, that just emphasizes the athlete to really focus on dipping straight down, getting that bar to drive straight up. And those are just like little movements and things that make a big difference. And like I said, there's so many that we can talk about, but those are honestly some of my favorites that work for me, that's worked for my athletes. I'm just a big believer in, a complex is very individual to an athlete. It's not just throwing a whole bunch of things together. I also do believe that if you are short on time, putting a complex together instead of just doing a single movement can really also help with, just getting the movements in. If you are going through a phase where training is hitting a plateau, and I'm not one to be like, okay, change your training every week kind of person, but adding some complexes in there, especially in weightlifting, because it's so monotonous, can really change things up a bit and make the sport exciting again. I mean, like for myself, competing for like so long, we had to make training exciting as well. And even though those complexes had a goal at the end of the day by making me stronger, they kind of just broke up the whole sort of, okay, today I'm just doing snatches or today I'm just doing clean and jerks.
Yeah, those are good points. And what I find interesting as well is when you will use a lot of these complexes. So I know, for example, in weightlifting, you might use them further away from competition, and you're probably doing more classical lifts as you get closer. But with strongman, because you have complexes within the competition, it's a little different. So how would you end up programming complexes within a strongman? Because I'm assuming you're not pacing it out where maybe further away from competition you're doing complexes, and as you get closer you're not, because a lot of the events are complexes themselves. So is there any specific way you go about that?
It really just depends on the event, to be honest. So, like, we could do the exact same thing. Let's say they've got a max log or max dumbbell. Further away from the competition, they might be doing like, I don't know, like 3 pause dips and then into 2, regular push press, something like that. So further away. And then as we get towards, we're doing the same, just like you're talking about in weightlifting, we get towards just doing the regular variation. But then if you have a complex in the competition, it's almost the opposite. So to use an example, again, of New Zealand's Strongest Man was on the weekend. Most of my athletes that competed, we had them do basically just regular deadlifts. And then once we hit around that 10-week mark, not all of them, but around the 10-week mark, we switched to just doing where they just did the start. I would have to check my notes what the exact height was, but it was something like 15 inches, quite an awkward height. So we just did that, and then we did deficits. For the people who were very strong, for example, the woman who ended up winning, Shayna, so she's New Zealand's strongest woman again. She was so strong with the final weight that we pretty much just focused on deficits the whole time. Because the final, once you got to the deficit, you then had to do reps as many as you could. So it's really kind of like how Mona was saying, you choose the complex based on the individual's strengths and weaknesses. You do the same depending on what the actual event is, and then the person's strengths and weaknesses as well. because that's a big example. Let's say Shayna, who could already rep on the deficit the final weight. Then I had other athletes who the first weight was going to be a much bigger struggle. So we focused on that. And then the others are kind of broad, where we generally just started far away from the competition with a more traditional lift. And then as we got closer, moved towards just exclusively doing complexes. So pretty much just vice versa to what you were talking about, how you traditionally do it with weightlifting, like the exact opposite.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was gonna cut to Mona there, but I think Mia's still being a little crazy there, screaming in the background. But like regarding complex as well, even just for general fitness, like my favorite go-to is the power clean push press. And 2+2 power clean push press, 2+2 or 2+1s, you can build some crazy strength and you'll add some size doing something as simple as that complex, and it's not too hard to do once you get some of the form down. But now Mia's drinking a bit. Mona, are you ever programming complexes? Obviously with strongman, they're going inverse. They're going traditional lifts going to complexes close to competition because competition has complexes. But are you programming complexes at all closer to competition, or is it more just straight classical lifts?
No, so when it comes for Olympic weightlifters, when they get closer to competition, you would say almost 3 weeks out from competition, I would almost completely cut all complexes and really just focus on the classical lifts, the snatch and the clean and jerk, or power snatch and power clean and jerk, and squats, front squat, back squat, and then clean pull, snatch pull. You want to keep it so that the athlete really focuses on the classical movements, because that's what they are going to do in competition. However, I would still incorporate the complexes as part of a primer to warm up for those movements. And then what Colm was mentioning, like changing it to complexes closer to oh my gosh. If it's a CrossFitter and they have a complex, then I would for example, program complexes, what they will do in the actual competition for the athlete. So if they do a certain bed complex, or there's a certain complex that they announce prior that the athlete will be doing, those are the kind of moves that we will come.
Oh my gosh. I had to pretend that she is going crazy. I think we know what Mona's saying there around. Yep, CrossFitters, you'll have complexes in there, but with weightlifters, those complexes come right out as you get closer to competition. So that's just something to bear in mind if you are competitive. Obviously, within powerlifting, they would be used far up from competition, as you, I guess you could say, in a quote unquote off season, and they would be more geared towards similar ones to what Colm was saying with the strongman stuff, with like the deadlift, etc. But I think that literally covers everything with complexes. I don't know if you have anything more to add, Colm, on these complexes.
Sure, I'll mention as well, I do like to use, like I was saying, how she uses them as a bit of a warm-up or a primer for the actual work. I do tend to do that as well. So, but like I said, pretty much all the stuff in strongman to do with complexes, especially overhead-wise, it's ripped straight out of weightlifting. They're the best ones at putting weights overhead. So
nice, perfect. And that deadlift competition, when is that coming up? That must be soon, right?
Yeah, I don't know the date off the top of my head, but it should be within the next couple of weeks, I would think. I think everyone's done their last heavy ones.
Yeah. Who you got taking that out?
It's hard to say. Like I don't want to speak bad of anyone, but we've got a current crop of people who, like I said last time, like everyone's chasing that 500. Everyone's jumping up to that next level, and I feel like there's just going to be like a bunch of them on that same spot. Where I think everyone's strength. I think, like, it's fair to say from training, just seeing their training on Instagram, it looks like everyone's gotten stronger, but that jump up to the 505 is still significant. So if I had to choose, like, say someone told me it happened and someone did in fact deadlift the 505, I would probably, my guess would be Makarov. So he's the one who posted the 490 deadlift training. But I kind of mentioned last week the thing that doesn't quite convince me is he was deadlifting off small mats, which does make a difference when we're talking deadlift suits, and you can really crank down the straps. And it's 15 kgs. Like that's a huge amount at that level. It's not, it's not like it's a small amount. So if it happened, he would be my guess. But it's funny because it's like a little bit of a look at the different training styles, right? He deadlifted 490 in training. I think Thor's last heavy deadlift session was 475 or 480. I forget off the top of my head, but about there, but a very clean lift. Like I think most people now that I see anyway have seen the 490 and kind of are not quite convinced, opposed to Thor, which was lifting less, 475 or 480, I forget which it was. But everyone was quite confident he would get it based on that lift. And then Eddie Hall, I think his last heavy might have been 455. He said he hit it for 3 singles, but same thing, it was just a speed rep. So it's a little bit of a look at different training styles, and it kind of highlights what I am a fan of, and what I've found is that you're better off just holding back a little bit in training and saving it for the comp, moving your last heavy sessions as efficiently as possible. That's going to not like fatigue you going into the competition. Not saying he hasn't done it. He could absolutely prove me wrong in next week or whenever it is he pulls 505. To be honest, I hope he does. It would be cool to see someone else do it. But yeah, nice. In general, those kind of, it just makes me think, he's pulled really heavy in training, not quite the same conditions, and 15 kgs is still quite a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, you think like small rubber mats to elevate the plates, you think that's nothing. But even if you say you did like a whole month of deadlifting from those rubber mats, and then the next session you remove them, you can feel the difference just in that small change, and your setup feels different, everything feels different.
Especially when we're talking with a multiply deadlift suit where you can crank the straps down to have like an exact start position. So
yeah, that'll be interesting. No, it'll be cool for you to update us on that. And I know mine is a bit occupied with me, but the CrossFit Games also finished on the weekend. Krenikov, the Russian CrossFitter, broke his foot during the damn event, but he still came third, even though he didn't complete like the last day and a half, maybe, I think it was, which is pretty nuts. That's how far ahead he was. So he crushed. Yeah, I mean, he crushed the beginning of that event. But also, I mean, they did actually televise it. So last episode we talked about how they were doing it, but they actually did get a TV deal. It was actually on ESPN Plus, but they had certain events on ESPN in the afternoon, so it was all free on YouTube and things like that.
Yeah.
But then like the evening or the afternoon sessions were all on ESPN, including the finals. So luckily,
did they end up having the max? Was it a max snatch and clean and jerk they were going to have?
Yeah, they did. They had. It was actually interesting how they actually did it, set it up. I was saying to Mona, I wonder if the IWF weightlifting are going to try and take that format at one time and test it out. But they basically had everyone on the floor with their own platform, and instead of like obviously a traditional weightlifting meet, you go up by weight. This one, it was just you just lifted an order of person, and you just chose what weight you wanted, and it was 2 attempts, and you had 20 seconds to do your attempt.
2 attempts and 20 seconds?
No, yeah, 2 attempts total, but 20 seconds for each attempt.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd just go, one person would go, they'd do it, and then the next person would go, then the next person would go, and it would just go through the order, and it was interesting. I mean, I can't remember any of the numbers. I think Mona might have watched it closer than I did with that, but yeah, it was, I guess, a pretty cool way of doing it. But obviously, if you do that within weightlifting, you kind of kill the sport of weightlifting and turn it into CrossFit, basically.
So they had multiple, like tons of platforms going at once.
Tons of platforms. Yeah.
As a viewer, was it easy to follow?
No, it wasn't easy to follow. But that's because I guess they didn't have like a live scoreboard up. If you had a live scoreboard up, I think it would be easier because then you can kind of flip people around with who's lifting the most and then maybe like highlight so you can see like, oh, this person's actually go for the number one spot over there, but they didn't do any of that. So yeah, it wasn't easy to follow, but you could make it easy to follow. I just don't think weightlifting will go down that road. It doesn't make much sense. You just turn into CrossFit then, but you never know. They might hold some, just a random competition and try it out, something like that. But it would kind of kill the whole strategy in the back room of weightlifting, right? Because you're watching the board and you're changing numbers based on your athlete, but you're also changing numbers based on everyone else and what places you need, etc. So there's a whole strategy out the back with a timer and all that. And you do this, you kill all that strategy, and all you're doing is just looking to see how much you need to do to get to the next spot versus playing a game in there. And I think Mona wants to come in here. Yeah? What you got?
Other than me having crazy, I was trying to pull up now the Olympic total.
Yep.
And I got some of the totals here. So like for the men, and I don't know how much they snatched and how much they clean and jerk, but like for the men, the first place was 701 pounds. So what is that? Like over 300 total.
Why would they do it in pounds?
Yeah, because the competition is in pounds. They snatch in pounds and they clean and jerk in pounds.
Okay, hang on. I'm doing the conversion.
319 or something.
318. Damn, Colin was close.
So that was for your first place. Well, nothing was like too impressive, but I just want to pull up the women's here. So first place was 470 pounds, and that was by Laura Horwath, who was the actual CrossFit Games winner.
213 kilos.
Yeah, which is actually really high for a woman. Like that's a big total.
Yeah.
Like that's
those are your totals.
That was close to like one of my best.
Yeah.
Totals. And I mean she's a really big girl. Like I mean she's big, but she's big and strong and
okay. Yep.
What was the judging like? Are you allowed to press out in CrossFit?
You can do anything. Yeah, it's just got to be overhead. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's not. It's weightlifting, but not weightlifting at the same time. It's more like strongman weightlifting. Since you can do whatever. So I mean, I wonder if IWF will go down the road. They've talked about getting rid of press outs, which would turn it into that. But I don't know. I don't see them doing that. You kill a lot of the sport doing that. So, but yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. We've covered pretty much everything this episode. But if you go down the description, there's a link there for the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground. You get all the training programs. We have the strongman programs from Colin. We have the weightlifting programs from Mona. We have a bunch of strength and size programs in there too. I think there's like 30 plus programs in there for you to do. For whatever your goal is in there, and the private community where you can come in, you can ask any questions. You need any of the training change, you need just anything to do with your training or diet. You just jump in there and ask us, and we're there to answer the questions. So you can take advantage of that. But stay tuned. Please like, subscribe, and we will see you next week. Same time, same place.